Recording started, the meeting started.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Firstly, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wylde Green and the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum ward meeting. I'm very grateful to be joined by my co-host, that's Councillor Terry Wood, now the Mayor of the Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council, so congratulations, sir, and the Secretary of the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum, Pat Brown, as well, who is here in attendance. I'm also very kindly supported by some officers, that includes Leslie and John as well. But firstly, some housekeeping, if I may. We will be muting everybody just to keep the background noise down. And the meeting is being recorded, so if you wish to turn your cameras off to avoid being recorded, then please do so. It may assist in terms of bandwidth as well. In terms of the conversation and the process, so on the top toolbar, you should see a speech bubble, which gives you access to the chat function. And if you want to type in any comments, any questions, etc., as we go along, they'll be bringing in comments and feedback as we go through. In terms of the agenda for the evening, I hope to start with a COVID update from Dr Justin Varney, who will be joining us promptly at 10 minutes past 7. There'll be a number of questions that I would like to pose to him, including a quick update on where we stand, an update on the Indian variant, which I'm sure is of concern to many people, some update on the restrictions as we're starting to ease, and of course travelling restrictions as well. And during that section of the agenda, if you would like to put any comments on the chat, then I'll be bringing people in as we go along, just to avoid the break in the flow with Dr Varney. And then at the very end, if we have time, we'll try and take some questions and answers, and I hope that's acceptable for everybody. We then also have a briefing from the West Midlands Police. I'm not sure whether there is anybody from the police force who are here, but the Sergeant Francis Clark has sent me a written update, so I can go through that and then take comments and push that back to the West Midlands Police on their behalf. Then the substantive item around the meeting is two sections. So the Commonwealth Games, which are going to be hosted in shortly 10 months' time, is it, John? So not too long time. They have actually delegated down some funding which wards can apply for. And the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum and myself, we've come up together with a joint proposal. Quite curiously, we came up with the idea separately, but they're actually the same proposal, which is quite fortuitous, which we'd like to put for a vote at the meeting. And then in terms of a general ward update, there's some number of items which I'd like to bring to everyone's attention, specifically around some planning updates, speeding roads, some changes around perhaps any of the local issues, for example, that I just want to raise. And then there's an opportunity for yourselves to be sending any comments and questions to myself for me to take away. There is also a poll function, which I hope to try and utilise in a new pizzazz of technology to try and make to get some feedback from yourselves. So there will be a screen that pops up. If you want to participate, please do so. You don't have to, of course, but it's all useful feedback for ourselves just to know where we stand. Okay. In terms of an update and starting for 10 there, Leslie, John, is there anything I've missed out?
No, nothing, Councillor.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I hand over to Pat Brown and maybe Pat Lyne, Terry Wood, if you want to make any opening remarks before we wait for Dr Varney at 10 minutes past.
Pat, you're on mute.
Alex, I have terrible trouble with the sound.
We can hear you fine. You haven't trouble hearing us.
It's like in an echo chamber.
Have you got any other equipment?
It is a bit echoey. I find that too.
Am I unmuted now?
You are now, yes, Pat.
Okay, that's good. Okay, finally. So you were asking for us to make any comments about the proposals for the...
No, just opening remarks from yourselves as members of the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum.
Do you have anything to say, Pat? We've lost Pat now. Oh, where's Pat gone? Oh dear. I don't know if you can hear us, Pat, but we've lost you.
If you're talking about Pat Brown, it looks as though her picture is frozen.
Right, okay.
Which means I think probably a breakdown her end.
I don't think we've got anything specific. We have questions for John, for Justin, and what else? It was about the bid really, and questions for John. Justin Varney. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Not at all. Thanks so much. Well, if I may, then, on behalf of the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum, it was just also to put a call out for any volunteers who are able and willing to join as committee members for the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum. We are a small and very active group, but we are always in need of some other active members to try and help support the work of the organisation. Pat? We just need to mute yourself.
And me. Pat Brown, is it? Pat Brown, you need to unmute yourself on the bar above. Looks like a microphone.
I don't know. Okay, it's off now. It's okay. I'm now. You can hear me now. I'm sorry, I lost connection for a little while earlier, so I missed what Alex, what you said. I'm Pat Brown, the secretary of the Wylde Green Forum, and we've not been terribly active this year for obvious reasons. We do desperately need new members. We particularly need members with computer skills. We're having problems with our website and Facebook site, etc. And we'd love somebody to be able to help us in administering that, please. So if anybody has any computer skills, that would be great. But any other skills as well, just we desperately need people who are keen to help improve Wylde Green.
Pat, you said we hadn't been very proactive, but we have on a criminal line with the police, with the various activities that
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we hadn't had any meetings as such, but possibly in August or September.
Councillor Yip, John Mole, hand up.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Councillor Yip, John Mole has his hand up. Is that an accident, John?
Not at all. It's to come back on the issue about computer literacy skills. There is the neighbourhood network scheme that is run by Age Concern. Now, I believe they're actually bringing in some professional advisors. So I will send you over, Pat, the contacts,
okay,
so that you can make contact with them, because I think they would be delighted to try and come over and assist.
Okay, that's good. Yes, good. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. That'd be most welcome. Thank you. I can't hear you, Alex.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. So I can see that we're joined by Dr. Justin Varney now, right on time. So, Dr. Varney, you've just made some opening introductions. I think we've got you for about 20 minutes. Is that right, sir?
Yes, it is, Councillor Yip.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out of what I know is a very busy schedule for you to join us. I've suggested perhaps 4 topics to touch on, and I've asked residents to post any questions on the chat which we can take as we go through. Firstly, perhaps a quick update on where we are in terms of Sutton Coldfield / Wylde Green. An update on the Indian variants, which I know is of concern to some residents, and perhaps on the restrictions which are starting to ease across the country. Okay, over to you, sir.
Great, thank you. Hopefully, can you just nod to show you can hear me, Councillor? Yep,
yes, thank you.
I'm having one of those days where Teams misbehaves itself, which is always part of the additional fun. So where we are in terms of the overall case rates across the city, sorry, I should say I'm working on 2 screens, which is why you'll get fabulous side beard while I look up to read my notes. But what we're seeing overall in Birmingham is that the case rate is coming down. We're now running at just under 16 cases per 100,000, which is a lot lower than where we have been previously. And overall, the total number of cases in the city over the last week dropped down to about 180 cases over the last 7 days. And we rank about 106th in the country. compared to other local authorities, upper tier local authorities. So really big improvement. Just to put this in perspective, Bolton is running at about 240 cases per 100,000. So we're quite a long way off that at the moment. But it is something I'll come on when I talk about the new variants of concern that we should be keeping an eye on. The NHS pressures have really improved, and we're now down to single figures when it comes to daily admissions of people living with COVID and affected by COVID, which is really, really good news. And you know, only 2 months ago, we were up in 3 figures a day. So it's a real reduction playing out. And gradually, we're starting to see that play out in the deaths. It will take a couple more weeks for the death numbers to really, really come down, but they are significantly improving.
Justin, are these Sutton-wide numbers or Birmingham-wide numbers?
These are Birmingham-wide numbers. So I'm going to come on to Sutton-Wylde Green numbers now. So Sutton-Wylde Green, for the period up to the 16th of May, ranked 39th out of the 69 wards, and only had 1 reported new case during that week, which is really good news. The overall rate, based on that one, given the size of the ward, is about 11 cases per 100,000 population, so slightly lower than the Birmingham average. And as of the 17th of May, we had 9 COVID champions in the ward. Looking at the vaccine uptake across Sutton-Wylde Green, it's going really well. So over almost 97% of the over 80s in the ward have had their first dose. And actually moving down through the priority groups, in all those over 6, down to in the groups over the age of 55, over 90% of people have had their first dose, which is really, really good and reflects all the hard work of local GPs, pharmacists and local NHS. Amongst the clinically extremely vulnerable, so that's the people that were shielding, it's about 94%. In the people who are considered at risk, the COVID at risk group, so they're the kind of people that every year have the flu jab, that's down to about 88%. Still, that's better than the Birmingham average, which is only 71%, so still doing better. And in the younger age groups, actually, you're still doing better than most of the rest of the city. About 89% of those between 50 and 54, and about 81% of those between 40 and 49. So vaccination coverage really good in the ward, which I think is really good news. And then looking at the demographics, obviously you've only got 1 case, so it's a bit, I will be a bit careful about what I say. But looking at your cases in general, they have been in your working age population rather than younger adults or older adults. It's been very much in the working age population in Sutton-Wylde Green. And the ethnicity spread very much reflects some of the diversity of the ward. So there's no particular thing that for me looks very odd and different. So that's the kind of current situation in the context of the ward. In terms of, and there are no significant outbreaks associated with the ward at the moment. And overall, what we're seeing across Birmingham is outbreaks in care homes have really come down. Where we are seeing clusters of cases in care homes, they are very much in staff rather than in residents, which reflects all the work that's been going on getting everyone vaccinated, which is really good news. We have seen some clusters of outbreaks in schools, but these have all been much, much smaller than what we saw in the autumn or in the January-February period. And none of them actually, I don't think we've had any in Sutton Coldfield as an area for a little while. And we've had a small number of workplace clusters appear, and there's no one section, so I can't say yes it's a problem in hospitality or retail or manufacturing. Each one's been slightly different, and we are doing some more work with the Chamber of Commerce to reinforce with businesses what COVID safe means. So moving on to the variants of concern. So these are variations of the virus that are either more infectious, more deadly, or cause the vaccine problems. And there are basically 4 variants of concern across the world that we're focused on. There is our own UK Kent variant that is called, the rest of the world call it UK, we call it Kent. And that is the majority of new cases in the UK and has been since January. That's more infectious. It looks like it has a slightly higher hospitalisation rate than the previous version of COVID, and the vaccine works fine with it. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the South African variant. That is as infectious as old COVID, maybe slightly more, but not as infectious as the Kent one. It causes a similar level of hospitalisation, but it does cause the vaccine some problems. So the vaccine does work, but what we find with the South African variant is that the vaccine is less good at stopping you catching it, but it's still very good at stopping you dying and ending up in hospital. So that's why when we have cases of the South African variant, we do the surge testing to try and find out if there are any others going on, because we're trying to identify those people quicker to make sure if they do get sick, we can get the support in place for them.
And how have these variants been in Birmingham?
So we've had 5 clusters of South African variants. So every time we do an Operation Eagle, like we did in Frankley, we've just done in Bawdsley and Highgate and Ladywood, and you see that like in the local media, that's all the ones we've done so far are for South African variants. And they've been small numbers. So in one case, we did it because we had 3 members of the same house had it, but they hadn't travelled anywhere. We couldn't. The surge testing is trying to find the missing bit of the jigsaw, and where we find South African variant and we can't find plane, international travel, or any connection to it, that's where we go hunting for other cases to try and find out where the person's caught it.
Thank you. If I can pause you for a second there,
yeah.
what I'm also going to do, and I've mentioned this to residents, is I've got some polls set up just to try and get some feedback. So for residents, you will see a screen pop up. Please do feel free to participate or not. There's a cross in the top if you don't wish to. Otherwise, if you just want to do a vote, and then we can share the results of that as we go along. Thank you, Justin.
I feel like I'm on Eurovision now. So the South African one we're worried about because of the vaccine breakthrough, basically. Then there's the Brazil variant. The Brazil variant is kind of in the middle between the Kent and the South African variant. It's slightly more infectious. The vaccine seems to work, but and we're not sure about the hospitalisation. And the reason the Brazil one we're still on the kind of fence about is we've had very, very few cases. So in Birmingham, we've only had 1 case of the Brazil variant, and that was on someone who got off a plane from Brazil. So we know we're still learning about the Brazil variant and how it behaves. And then there's the new Indian variant, also known as April 02 variant. We're all gradually going to have to learn their new names because we're trying not to call them by the country, but I'm afraid I haven't learned all the variants yet. So the April 02 one is the Indian variant. And that's very much what's driving Bolton and Blackburn and Darwin at the moment. It is definitely more infectious than the Kent variant. We do not know yet whether it causes more hospitalisation, but we're pretty confident it doesn't cause any less. And the vaccine works in terms of reducing the risk of death, but it looks like you need both doses of the vaccine to stop hospitalisation. So in Bolton, there have been quite a large number of people hospitalised. The majority of them are people who were entitled to have a vaccine. They were in the high risk groups, but they hadn't had the vaccine yet. There's a small number who'd had 1 dose, but not the second dose. And there's only 1 individual that's had both doses of the vaccine. And that individual was already very elderly and quite frail. So they're not confident that it's, in effect, COVID pushed them over the edge or whether the vaccine didn't stick because they had so many other health problems going on. So it's giving some reassurance that the vaccine does what it says on the tin, which is stop you dying, stop you ending up in the hospital. but we're less confident that it stops transmission as well. Where we are in terms of the April variant, the Indian variant in Birmingham, is we're just starting to get localized data through. Of those cases where I know whether it is or isn't linked to travel, the majority are linked to travel, either by someone who got off a plane or someone who lives with, works with, goes to school with someone who got off a plane. So that's where the quarantine is so important in containing this. We are starting to see the numbers rise, and I'm not surprised by that. We're seeing certainly signs that the Indian variant may well do what the Kent variant did around Christmas, is as we all come out and mix more, it may just ramp through the country and become the dominant variant. Now that's fine to some extent, as long as the vaccine still works and it doesn't put more people in hospital. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment to try and look at what's happening with this variant in the context of a UK population. So I meet every other week now. I was meeting weekly, it's gone to fortnightly, with the Chief Medical Officer for England, Chris Whitty. And he talks me and my colleagues, the other directors of public health, through what's going on. And I've been raising very specifically my concerns about the situation in India, the evidence we were seeing of younger age groups going to hospital. And what he was saying is the data from India is very difficult to interpret in the context of the UK, because the baseline health of the population is very different. So children in India in general have much worse health than children in the UK. So it may be that more children end up in hospital with COVID in India because their bottom baseline health is worse, which makes a lot of logical sense. So until we see Indian variant in other countries that have similar baseline health to the UK, it's very hard to kind of guesstimate how risky it is in terms of the NHS. So at this point, we have to be cautious. And where we see cases which do not link to international travel, we are doing additional testing. And I think you will see more of that. There's stuff going on in Dudley and in Sandwell at the moment. You may well see it starting in Birmingham. And we tend to do it in a very defined geographical area. So what we, in effect, most of us live our lives within around a kind of 2 kilometres of where we live and 2 kilometres of where we work, and the journey backwards and forwards between the two. And for children, obviously, you can swap out school for work. It's relatively unusual for us to spend a large proportion of our time, unless we've got family, in a very different part of the city. So what we tend to do is when we find a case, we kind of draw a geographical boundary around it. It's usually about 5,000 people, which is usually about 1,000 to 2,000 households. When we go door to door offering kits, we supply kits to the schools, to the workplaces, and that's how we capture the more picture of what's going on. So at the moment, I think the picture around the new variants is, I do suspect that the Indian variant would increase in the UK. The big question of whether that makes a difference to the roadmap will be all based on whether we see evidence that it's putting more people in hospital. And for all of us, the best thing you can do is go and get your jab as soon as you're eligible, because certainly what we're learning from Bolton is that really reduces your chances of ending up in hospital and dying. And actually, if the rest of Birmingham had the uptake that Sutton Wylde Green has, I would be a very happy man. Unfortunately, there are still some challenges in other parts of the city where they're trailing quite a long way behind you.
We do lead by example.
So, well, and there are lots of reasons why that happens, but I think you have the advantage of a pretty stable, good set of GPs in the area, and I think also as a community you've really engaged with what's going on with COVID and responded to things when you're asked to, which is good. It's certainly not a part of the city that is high on my anxiety list, frankly, in terms of what's going on.
Just moving further a little bit, Justin, if I may, do you have an update on the speculated booster jabs in October to try and combat variants? And also, again, just moving on around restrictions and easing of travelling restrictions.
Yeah, so booster jabs, one of the things we are seeing is that the new variants, basically, if you have really good antibodies, the antibodies win. So it doesn't matter, even against the ones where the vaccine struggles a bit. If you've got good antibody response, then the antibodies win out. In general, the older you are, the weaker your antibody response. So what the thinking at the moment is that we would give a third booster dose of the vaccine to the most elderly and the people in that clinically extremely vulnerable group, probably in January. It's unlikely to come before then, to just boost their immunity, to give them that extra little bit of strengthening for any future variants. We won't see the vaccines themselves change to include the new variants until probably early summer next year, because it takes time for the engineering bit to change, and then it has to go through safety trials again. So I would expect we will see that booster jab probably December, maybe, but more likely January. We'll see the current vaccination programme, I expect, extend down to secondary school age children by about September. So they're going to keep on working through the age groups until we get pretty much to everyone over the age of 12 has had the vaccine. So that's the plan on that front. In terms of the roadmap, we'll see what happens around the Indian variant, but I think we will get to the 4th stage. I think it's likely we may keep some of the restrictions, like wearing a face covering when you're in an indoor space with people you don't live with, like a cinema or shopping, where it's quite difficult to track who's in the space. I'm not as confident nightclubs will open in June for those of you that are party goers. I think that's the one that's still up for debate, and that's really because it's very hard to ventilate a nightclub well, and ventilation is a key aspect of this that we've been learning about over the tail end of the year. I think in terms of international travel, the advice is you should only go to green countries on holiday. Anything else is only for essential reasons, i.e. someone's died, family emergency, that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you should only be going to green countries for holidays. I do recognise that the price of a flight to Portugal has gone through the absolute roof. So I think this is probably the year to stay local and explore the wonders that the West Midlands has to offer. And the
same as the past few years as well, just in staying home.
Yeah, I think if you do travel though, and this is the reason I say, bluntly, I would put off any overseas holidays for a little while, is there is a real risk that you can go out this week and it's a green country, and when you're ready to fly back on Sunday next week, it's turned red, and then you've got to pay about £1,500 for a quarantine hotel and tests. So I think that's the bit you've got to take into mind when you're thinking about holidays, is can I afford that risk of it being a red country and changing while I'm out there? And if you can't, then I think it's save your pennies, travel local this year and go, plan the super holiday next year when things will be easier. Because I think we will have a summer of countries going red, amber, green, backwards and forwards, and it will be quite a lot of changes.
Okay, I think that's very helpful, Justin, and as always, very comprehensive. Very quick rattle through quite some technical issues, and appreciate the statistics, especially for the ward as well as citywide. If anybody has any questions, if you want to raise your hand or if you want to chip in, you're more than welcome to. I can see Pat Brown and then Pat Lyons got their hands up. So would you like to, Pat Brown, would you like to, if you're able to unmute yourself, and then we'll take a.
I have a sort of a comment thank you for that update. That was really informative. I have a comment and a question. The question is about the flu vaccination. Are there plans still to combine the booster jab with the flu vaccine for people over 65? Is my first question.
It won't be the same injection. They're doing trials at the moment to see if you give them one in each arm at the same time, how does the body react to that? I think the likelihood is that most of us would rather have them on separate days, to be honest.
Okay, rather than
Because,
two sore arms.
yeah, it definitely won't be one injection. That they've shown
Okay.
it's not possible.
And the other thing that I'm very concerned about, I don't have my own transport, so I use the bus and train quite a bit. The trains are fine, but I was on the bus yesterday evening and there were loads of people without masks on. And you often find people shouting on buses and behaving as though things are normal. I know that shouting and loud noises are conducive to spreading the virus from your mouth. And I know that not wearing a mask is. So buses don't seem to be particularly good at maintaining these levels of protection. And often they're quite hot and stuffy, as you probably know, with not good ventilation. I wonder what your comments are about that and how we could improve travel on buses during this time.
So, as you know, this sits with West Midlands Transport, and we have continually through this been working with the Combined Authority to reinforce the messaging around making public transport safe, and particularly around buses. I think, as we can understand, the challenge they have is that the drivers struggle at times to feel comfortable confronting people.
Yes.
So what has been happening is there's been an increased presence from the transport police playing a role, and also the COVID marshals that the council employ, popping on and off buses to remind people as well about face coverings. And we've asked West Midlands Transport to also include regular announcements. So, you know, you get like the automated announcement that comes through. That also can be done. Ultimately, the challenge there is that the face covering regulation, the enforcement, sits with the police. So the people who can actually issue the fines if you're not wearing a face covering when you should is the police, not anyone else.
Right, okay.
So that does cause challenges. But if you have been on a bus route and you've seen really bad practice, please report it to West Midlands Transport, because what they need is the bus route and the time you were on the bus. Let them know, then they'll start to be able to identify are there particular bus routes or particular times when there's a problem, and then they can look about asking us for a COVID marshal or linking with the transport police to get someone on a route to try and make it a bit safer.
Okay, thank you for that, Justin. Can I bring in Pat Line, please? You'll just need to mute yourself. Try again. There we go.
Okay, I'm having trouble with my button. I was saying thank you very much. It was most interesting, Justin. Thank you so much. My question is, with the lifting of restrictions, I haven't seen any guidance on advice for car sharing. Is there any advice?
Yep, so the current advice still says avoid car sharing between different households if you can. If you are going to share a car with people that you don't live with, all the windows down and face coverings on, and preferably one household in the front, one household in the back. Now, I know that's not always practical, but you know, the key bit is try and separate the households where you can in the car. Keep the windows open to keep the ventilation going. You don't have to have them all the way down, but you do need to get a decent airflow through, and wear face coverings while you're in the car, because it will just keep you all that little bit safer. And then the added thing I would say is, and this goes for anything at the moment, if you're going to go and visit friends and family, if you're going out to the restaurant or to the pub for you know, do the lateral flow test, the free rapid test, doing it twice a week, but you can always get more. So if you know you're going to do a road trip, say you're going to London with friends to go out for dinner, if you all test that day, it reduces the risk. The tests aren't perfect, but it does help knock out people who are really infectious, because what they're very good at doing is finding people who are very infectious. So testing on the day, if you know you've got to have that kind of car share, is another extra thing you can do.
Okay, and one other question, if I may, please. In regard to the QR codes when you go to restaurants, should they still be encouraging these?
Yes, and they're still required to. If you go somewhere and they don't, then you can report it through the council's got an anonymous website. So on the council, you go to report a COVID concern. Just let us know. And then what happens is we usually follow up with a telephone call first. And then the COVID marshals kind of do a drive-by and have a look. And then depending on how many issues are being raised, we then do an unannounced visit as well. So there's a kind of hierarchy depending on how many people complain. But we are reinforcing that, and that's where we're working with the business improvement districts, the Chamber of Commerce, some of the trade associations to kind of say, look, we're reopening lots of things, but it isn't a free-for-all. You still have to have social distancing. You've still got to have the hand hygiene. You still need the QR code. And that's still a really important part of it. So we are doing some stuff to reinforce that with them as well.
Right, I see a report coming on there. And just one question very briefly. I don't know if it's rumour, but I've heard that there are incidents of the Indian variant in Solihull.
There are cases of the April Indian variant across most of the West Midlands. We've all got some. What I would say in terms of Solihull is their numbers will be quite distorted by the quarantine hotels. So all of the quarantine hotels for the airport are by Birmingham Airport, which is just over the border in Solihull. So it's one of the things that I know they're quite sensitive about, but it is also important when you look at the numbers, because of the quarantine hotels, their numbers are going to get a little bit distorted as we go through this.
Thank you, Justin. A final quick question, if I can, from Councillor Terry Wood. As quick as you can, please, sir. You all need to unmute yourself. And while I'm waiting, can I thank you, Justin? I know that we are...
I apologise, I've done the same thing again. I'm just trying to clarify this business of travelling cars, and one other question from that. If two people travelling from different households travel in a car, but both have had 2 vaccinations, is there a risk there, or?
Yeah, so still, even if you've had both jabs and it takes about 3 to 4 weeks after the second jab for it to fully kick in, I would still act as if you hadn't had the vaccine at the moment. So at the moment, we've not got different guidance for people who have had the vaccine from people who haven't. I do think probably by the summer we will, because there'll be a much larger proportion of the population that have had 2 jabs. But at the moment, even if you've had 2 jabs, stick with the rules, particularly on things like car sharing, because if one of you had got one of the variants that breaks through the vaccine, you're putting the other person at risk. So that's the bit about, just at the moment, I'd play it safer rather than being sorry. But I think probably come the summer, we will get slightly different guidance for the vaccinated, because we'll have a better understanding about how some of these variants behave in the UK rather than how they're behaving in lower income countries, which have very different health profiles.
In my new role, which started last night, I shall be meeting lots more people from all sorts of backgrounds and areas. What advice would you give me to protect my health?
So at the moment, my advice would be still keep your distance, still keep that, it doesn't necessarily have to be quite the 2 meters, but meet outside where you can. If you're meeting inside, make sure the room is ventilated, keep your distance, try to avoid handshakes and hugs. It's definitely not something to bring back until probably much, much later in the year. Have a little packet of hand sanitizer in your pocket, because you'll be touching door handles, those kind of things. And be, as I say, be cautious. We are in a window of time where I think it's the 3rd wave will come. It's when, not if. And we're really on a sprint now to get as many people vaccinated as possible before that 3rd wave comes. And in the meantime, even those of us who've been vaccinated have to play our part, because one of the things that we can do as vaccinated people is touch something that's got the virus on it and touch something else. And that's how we transmit it. And that's one of the bits to be really conscious about.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
Very helpful, thank you. And I mean, I personally didn't realise that it took sort of 2 to 3 weeks for the second jab to fully kick in. And you may be happy to know that of the 2 polls, so 9 out of 9 people consider themselves well informed about COVID. So you're certainly doing a good job. And 8 out of 10 have no concerns around a COVID jab. So I thank the residents for that feedback as well. And Justin, as always, thank you very much for your time. So I really appreciate it. I know that you're incredibly busy, and I'm sure residents are most grateful for that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Bye.
Okay, so I hope residents found that very helpful. Justin is incredibly busy, and we're very lucky to be able to take him for 10 minutes extra than his allotted time. Moving on to the next section of the agenda. So I'm not sure whether there's anybody from the West Midlands Police who are here to do any feedback. I'm just going to pause there for a second to let someone unmute. I can see there's a PC actor. I'm not sure whether you're here as a guest or on behalf of the police.
Hello there, Councillor. This is PC Ruffton. I'm here in place of Sergeant Clark, who gives her apologies. She couldn't make this meeting.
Fantastic, you're very kind. I've got the written update from her. Would you like to give an all update and take perhaps some questions and answers? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, if you want to go with that.
Fantastic.
Would you like me to go through the update, or are you going to go through the update yourself?
I can if you like. I've got it in front of me. But otherwise, I'm happy for you to take the lead on it.
I can go through the update. I've got it here. So I'll give apologies for this. This is sort of last minute for myself, but this is an update that was prepared by Sergeant Clark. Over the last few months, the neighbourhood team have been tasked with various priorities from the senior leadership team. This involves policing the COVID breaches and also working hard to ensure that the easing of restrictions at each point goes smoothly. For example, the reopening of the pubs, the monitoring their plans, and having officers abstracted for nighttime economy patrols. We've been sent to deal with a number of COVID breaches and a repeat location, which was the aesthetic gym. Officers have had to work closely with environmental health and carry out regular checks at that location because the gym was kind of continuing to open and continuing to trade. Regular visits and the gym has complied and closed. That'll be something I think moving forward that we need to keep an eye on as the lockdown eases, to make sure that the measures in place and the recommendations are being adhered to. Current priorities in the area: under 25 violence, gang violence, weapons and domestic violence. We've recently held OpSceptra, where there's been a week-long action around knife crime. This involved knife arch operations at the local schools and also the train station and in Sutton Town Centre. I can actually report there's been a knife crime carried out today at Sutton train station, and we've actually had quite a good arrest from that, which was part of the County Lines drugs intervention. So that's been another positive result there. There's been weapon sweeps in the high crime areas, the parks, and we do a lot of work with the schools around with that. And we've been working alongside British Transport Police, who I think it was Justin that mentioned anything to do with the trains or the bus network is pretty much the Transport Police, but at times we have been supporting those doing operations on the bus routes and on.
Sorry, officer, I've just muted you. I think a phone's going off on your end. I could see some people recoiling, so I've just muted you. I don't know if you want to turn your phone off. Thank you.
Are we back on?
Yes, thank you.
There's no phone.
I can still hear you. There's something going on your end. I don't know if you've got any sound equipment or anything close to the speakers, if you can just double check that. While you're doing that, if I can just fast through the rest of the briefing. It is quite a long briefing, and I don't propose to read it all out. There's 4 sections which the West Midlands Police have targeted in terms of an update. So beggars, I know, has been aggressive begging has been an issue with some of the town councils, especially have worked on. 14 community protection warnings to regular, persistent and aggressive begging has resulted in a significant reduction. They're also being referred to rehabilitation programmes. Regarding graffiti, you may know that the Saint tagging led to prosecution. Unfortunately, it was only an £80 fine, which is quite disappointing. And I know that some tags has returned since. Myself, I've been along with some officers and some supporting businesses to try and get that cleaned up. But it is frustrating, and there is a report line. If residents see anything like that, please do let me know, and we do endeavour to try and get that removed as soon as possible. Regarding burglary offences, so there's from last year to date, there was 145. This year to date, it's 117. So that's around a 20% reduction, which is very welcome news. And the report states that there was an offender arrest on the 12th of May by response officers for 1 burglary and 1 attempted burglary in the Birmingham Road. This was following swift action from officers called to the address who found the male nearby with stolen property on him. So again, that's a good result, and it does show clearly the strong testament in terms of the police quick, rapid response. And in terms of vehicle crime, which is the final piece, again, the previous year to date was 224 instances. This year to date is 172. So that's a 23% reduction. And police do highly still recommend steering locks to combat keyless thefts on cars that have that keyless entry, because there is equipment to get over it. But also in terms of catalytic converter thefts, which are still quite common. Officer, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm not sure what the interference is. Can you hear me okay now?
It's intermittent. Can everyone else hear that, or is it just me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies.
Sorry, I'm just going to mute you there. Does anybody have any questions? We can always type up on the chat if anybody wants to raise their hand. Happy to take any questions for the officer. Terry?
Yeah, we seem to be getting a lot of telephone fraud calls from the HMRC, from Hermes, Delivery, Royal Mail. What's the best way to tackle this?
That's a very good question. I actually received one today from HSBC, and I went through some of it, and then I got highly suspicious and asked them to verify themselves, and they weren't able to. So I'm still not sure whether it's real or false, but I'll be following that later. Officer, are you still with us?
Yeah, apologies if this is interference. Yeah, along with the scams and that, I think the individual organisations are putting a lot of work into this, and any sort of scam calls that you get from business requests. So if it's a banking request, feed that back to your bank, and also Action Fraud. They look at the fraud cases to do with scam calls, but the first one will be refer it back to your own bank. Obviously, some of these scammers, they've got no details about yourself, no personal details. Personally, I've received ones for NatWest Bank. I've never backed with NatWest Bank. So straight away, you can identify that as a scam. Also, any banks or companies that you are affiliated with will generally address you by your name, whereas the scammers, it will be dear customer, dear sir, dear mom. They haven't got the personal details about you. But absolutely, anything that seems suspicious from you that you receive yourself, first port of call would be to refer it back to the supposed company that sent it and clarify it with them. I know that's not always simple and straightforward to do, because some of these scammers are getting ever increasing complicated methods of approaching people.
Yes, that's very good advice. And in terms of my own experiences, so I did verify their website and their link, the telephone numbers, but I have heard of instances of friends who have done the same thing, checked on the internet, tried to verify a telephone number, and the scams are so sophisticated that they have got those shadow websites set up, mimicking a bank or an organization. So my best advice is, if at any point they're asking you to share information, especially your date of birth, numbers, telephone numbers or addresses, anything like that, then trust your gut. Always err on the side of caution and hang up, because of course they can always call you back. Rod, would you like to come in, sir?
Yeah, just a couple of points if people haven't had them recently. If you get a phone call which comes up from a mobile number purporting to be Amazon, that's absolute rubbish. Amazon will never ring you from a mobile number. But the other thing that's happened in the last 48 hours or so is that people's WhatsApp privacy settings have changed. So instead of it being your contacts only, it's now everyone, which means people can add you to a group that you may not want to be part of. So if you use WhatsApp, go into your settings, check your privacy settings, and make sure it says your contacts only. That's just only happened in the last 48, 72 hours.
Yes, and that's very good advice in terms of making sure that your personal detail is kept safe. Pauline, would you like to come in? You'll just need to unmute yourself.
Is there anything we can do to stop having the automated telephone calls to our landlines and mobiles?
There is an X directory that you can sign up to, but I think the general rule of thumb is that once your number's out there, it's quite hard for it to become an X directory. You need to get the number set up, but I'm not an expert in that. Officer, are you able to assist at all on that?
Apologies, Councillor. What was that?
It's around making your number barred from nuisance calls, your land number.
In relation to your landline number, is that, or mobile number?
Yes, so if you're receiving nuisance calls and spam calls to your landline.
I believe there's the TPS, the telephone preference service. You can register your number with those. They can block your number. Again, I'm not sure how that's been impacted with the several private companies now. You know, many people have their home phone provided by Virgin, by TalkTalk, by Sky. I'm not sure what those individual companies would do with regards to blocking numbers and things. I think that'd be something that have to go through the private providers. There's that many providers now of phone networks.
Okay, I've already got the preference telephone calls. It's these are the automated ones by voice automated. As soon as you say hello, they click in.
So there is another system that you can either purchase, or there's an equipment where if I'm calling you, there's an automated system that answers it, requiring me to give my name, and then it will carry on ringing through. So on your end, you will see you've got a call from Councillor Yip, and then you can opt in or opt out. And if it's an automated call, then they won't have that ability. Perhaps that's something for you to look into, perhaps, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
John, would you like to come in?
It's just to follow on what you said, Councillor. I've got one of those phones myself because I was inundated by random ungenetic calls that were coming through. There's a very simple one, BT. It costs about £30, and it has made my life so much easier.
Well, there we are. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? Fantastic. In which case, officer, thank you very much for your time. I have got a quick poll which I wanted to put up to try and get some feedback from residents as well. We do. I used to send a regular survey out to residents just to find out what main issues are troubling yourselves, if it's litter, crime, speeding, etc. If you'd like to just take a moment to fill in the poll, I'll be obliged. Of course, there's no obligation to, but it's always helpful for us to know what your main concern is at the moment. In terms of moving on with the agenda, if nobody has any other questions for the officer. Fantastic. In which case, it's not PC Actar, is it?
No, PC Roughton.
PC Rochdale. Thanks so much indeed. Well, thanks so much for your time, sir. Appreciate you giving me up this evening.
The issues, but yeah, thank you.
Not at all. It's very good to have you with us. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving rapidly through the agenda. The next item which I wanted to bring to everybody's attention is around the Commonwealth Games funding. So as many of you may know, the city is hosting the Commonwealth Games in, I think it's about 10 months' time now. So, and as part of that, there's some money that's been devolved down to the local wards to bid. And these wards have to have an application put together and has to be approved through ward meetings like this one. And the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum and myself, we have put together separately a plan. So I came up with an idea, the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum came up with one, and we both presented to each other in it. So it was quite nice to see that actually we had the same idea. Now, this is only initial ideas, it's only initial thoughts. We do need to run through various other things, but I'd like to put this to you for everyone's consideration. John, at this point, would you like to go through the Commonwealth Games funding and then we can talk about the proposals?
Quite happily, Councillor, quite happily. Bear with me while I just test my PC knowledge to its limit. Where's that happening? Right, hopefully you can all see that.
Fantastic. Would you like to stick it on to the slideshow?
Oh, no, you're asking too much from me.
Top toolbar, 6th line along, it looks like the one with a stand with a play on it. Top orange toolbar, left, that's the one.
That one?
Thank you.
Aha, success. I've learned something new. Thank you, Councillor. Right, good evening all. I'm John Mole from Birmingham City Council. I'd just like to start by saying this is by far and away the best ward in the city. Mind you, I am rather biased because I live here. As the councillor has already said, yes, we have got the Commonwealth Games. So as part of that, to celebrate the Commonwealth Games, there is a small pot of funding that has gone out to every ward in the city. So, hello, let's get to the nitty gritty. How much do we actually have? It's not a huge sum, and I've got to stress this. The ward has only got £11,100, so that's not going to go a great distance. But what I am prepared to do, Councillor, is if we've got any groups, and perhaps we could look at match funding, and I could look towards some external funding. It's one of my little skills, as you're aware of. So if we've got any groups that have got some ideas, I can always try and help them to try and turn that 11,000 into something a little bit more, hopefully. Right, so what is the Small Grants Fund? The whole idea of this is that we start to celebrate the fact that we've got the games. It's to generate some enthusiasm. It's to get people both proud of the fact that we've got the games, because it was a bit of a coup d'etat in some ways, but it's also about being proud of being Birmingham and being a Brummie, although obviously we're in Sutton Coldfield, so we don't talk about such things. There are 3 particular elements that we need to look at. There's the Get Active theme, there's the Ready Steady Fund theme, I always struggle saying that, and the Celebrating Culture element. Now, there are 3 completely separate elements, but so long as we can meet one of those elements, then we've got a potential of a good project coming through. There are 2 rounds of funding. Now, the first round, applications are due by the 1st of June, so it's a very, very tight deadline. But the round 2 applications are due from the 30th of November, and they're going to run right the way through to the games. And if we have a COVID pandemic problem, we will probably even take that funding slightly over. What I've got to stress, please don't panic on timelines. I'd much rather see a good bid coming after June than a rushed bid that we try to get in the next 2 weeks that doesn't meet the criteria for the city and it ends up being turned away. First element, Get Active. This is probably the most easy and obvious one to actually go for. We're encouraging communities to get out, get active. I'm sure Justin Varney would be delighted, because obviously if we can get more people being active, the health impact that comes with that, we all know is just a wonderful thing. So some of the bids that have been coming in across the city at the moment, we've been having some mini games ideas where we've had schools deciding they want to set up their own Commonwealth Games processes, and that's brilliant. But we're also looking at active streets and parks. How do we use our green open spaces better? Do we want to do some Tai Chi, some yoga in the parks, etc., etc., etc.? Second element is Ready Steady Fun. Now, we want to see communities which help ensure your local area is games ready. Again, this is about and I'm going to keep stressing this tonight. It's about enthusiasm for the games. So what could we do to make that work? We could have volunteers going around cleaning the streets. We could have Commonwealth Games flower displays. We could just have fun days where we start to talk about what it is about being a citizen of Birmingham and how we've possibly got heritage that goes back to the Commonwealth Games. And then we've got Celebrating Culture, which is Birmingham's place in the Commonwealth, an honest acknowledgement of Birmingham's legacy. And this is about trying to encourage, again, the theme and the history of Birmingham and how it's developed and how we can tie that into the games. And I've got to keep stressing this. We need to keep that link to the games. I will share with you all now. I've seen, because I'm actually I'm in the process of actually adjudicating some of the bids that are coming into the city. I've seen a huge amount of bids that have come in that have got absolutely no connection whatsoever to the Commonwealth Games. Fabulous projects, but nothing to do with the game. So we need to always bear in mind, we have got those 3 key elements that we need to follow through. The funding core criteria. It's got to, again, and I'm going to keep stressing it, links to the Commonwealth. how it supports your local ward plan. And I'm pleased to say that the Wylde Green's got a very good detailed ward plan. If we didn't have that, councillor, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, because unless there's a ward plan in place, we will not have any funding come through to those wards. So we need to.
Memory serves, you helped me write that one, John.
It must have been magnificent in that case, councillor. Right. Funding, what can be funded? Now, we've left this as wide as we possibly can. So funding can cover just about anything it might need to. So it can be core costs. It's amazing how many external bids you cannot get because they won't pay core costs. So that could be running costs. It could be to actually pay for somebody. We're looking at revenue costs. It will cover new and existing projects, and it will cover one-off initiatives. We have really tried to keep it as wide as we possibly can. Now, to submit your application, there's a simple email, which is the ndsu@birmingham.gov, which comes through to my team, and we will actually assess them. I've also got, however, a very nice simple Word document. You can go into Birmingham City Council's website and draw down the processes. I'd probably recommend the Word document, to be truthful. A lot of people that I've been talking to are far happier right now with a very simple basic Word document that you then just send through to the email that's above. But you can go online and you can do it directly online, and we have had bids come through that have been quite successful from that. Right, writing your application, three different elements. Up to £1,000 is the first element. So you could have an application that goes in up to £1,000. These in the majority will probably go through on a wink and a nod. We're not going to be asking too much information on that, because this is just about, again, just getting local communities just to have a little bit of community engagement. The second element, you can apply from £1,000 to £5,000, or you can apply up to £10,000. Actually, my apologies, I should have put that on there. 10,000 is the maximum that you can actually apply for in one application for one particular project. Once again, please, please, please align your bid to the games, and I'm going to keep stressing that throughout the night. Right, what makes a good application? Right, first of all, you've got to make certain you've got your name of your group, your project and your ward. You don't even need a bank account, because we're going to have some community groups that haven't set themselves up with community bank accounts. What we would have in that case, we would have to find some sort of parent organisation that would be prepared to take the money and then pass that through to the community group. So you don't even need a bank account. What you do need to be able to do, though, is make certain you know which theme you're applying to in those three elements. The total cost and what you'll be spending the grant on. We'd like to see a good detailed breakdown on that. We don't want rough various costs. It's public money. It's got to be exact. So if you say that you are going to run a community games and it's going to cost £3,000, I want to see why that £3,000 is there. Again, £1,000 plus applications. Make certain that you align with the ward priorities. Our ward priorities are really wide, so we have no issues at all with that. I'm sure it will cover just about everything. You need to think about how you will deliver your project, how you know it will be successful. If you're starting to ask for money from £5,000 to £10,000, we'll be looking at a far more detailed version of that. So how do we know it's going to be successful? Let us just say, for example, because I know we've already had a bit of a discussion on it, we apply for some play equipment. So it'll be how many young people will be on that play equipment that we can perceive over the next 12 months. We can find data for that because we've got all of that at the city if we were to have something like that. Is there any external match funding? Is there any other revenue that you're drawing in? And it comes back to my offer as well. I will help any group, if I can, to draw down some external funding, because that will be very good, because then it will show a very good balance that not only we're applying for city funding, but we found some of our own funding. If you are applying for larger sums and the grant funding, it is important to think about the legacy of the activities. We will fund a one-off event. But if we could fund a one-off event that has a long-lasting impact, that would be absolutely fabulous. And we'd much rather see that, to be true. Right, writing a good funding bid. I actually give external funding lessons, so I'll be probably running a few across the city. So I will invite anybody in the ward that might be interested. But what do you need? Right. Read the guidance and application form all the way through. That's the first thing. It's almost like going back to school, but where you actually do an exam. And what is it they say? Read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, then start to answer the question. I would suggest we do that as well, although our headings are very, very simple. Make sure you're answering the questions that are being asked. Again, we're actually going to be scrutinising these applications, so we want to make certain there's a good theme and there's a good scheme running through it all. Be clear both in your presentation and answers. Make sure your budget adds up. I'm going to stress again, it's public money. and get someone else to read it through if you can, because sometimes it's better to have a second pair of eyes. Right, there are two sites that are very useful when it comes to involving your community, and I'd recommend them to anybody anyway. And I've put them both on, and I will put this presentation out available to everyone. Locality are an organisation that have been working for a long time across the country, and they are excellent at bringing in community engagement and community projects. So I would recommend that you go into locality websites on both of those. We have also, however, got briefing workshops. If people are struggling with ideas and they think they need some extra support, we've actually got a company called Birmingham Community Matters, which are a local charity in Birmingham, and they're very, very good at the moment in building up local communities. And we've paid them a very small sum of funding so that they can come and offer some advice to groups when it comes to actually thinking about what a good bid looks like and how it meets the Commonwealth Games processes. And then if there is any more support you need, again, we've actually got a support group running right now that you can just send an email to, and they will advise and point you in the right direction. A very quick whistle stop tour, Councillor, because I know you've got some specific ideas, and obviously because of that, I'm quite happy to open to any questions that anybody's got.
You're very kind, John. Thank you very much.
And I'll just stop sharing in a minute.
And as John's outlined, any group and any organisation can apply for the funding, the Commonwealth Games grant funding. But myself and the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum, so we've come up with what is in effect a joint proposal. But in terms of the application, anybody can submit. The process has to be that it has to be submitted through a ward meeting like this one, so that residents get to vote on it. My personal inclination was very much against a one-off party. I think the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum and myself, we wanted to see something which could add value for a longer period of time, something of substance, something that could last in line with the Commonwealth Games, just so we can try and get some lasting investment into the ward, which is why we came up with our own specific proposals. Terry, did you want to come in, and then we'll move on to our proposals for residents to consider?
I wanted to paint a wider picture of, am I muted again?
No, you're good.
No. I wanted to paint a wider picture of what we've done as Sutton Town Council. As you probably all know, we enter the Britain in Blue competition every year. We missed last year because of COVID, but next year, what we've done with the summer bedding and planting around the town is planting it up, or the colours will be the Commonwealth Games colours. Furthermore, you've probably all noticed the extra wildflower planting that's going ahead on all the main access roads into Sutton, especially along Monmouth Drive, which is one of the main access roads, obviously, to the park. The islands at Stonehouse Road and Clifton Road, Park Road, will have some Commonwealth Games willow sculptures to welcome our visitors to the town. And what I would like to do is more emphasis on the railway station and the area around there, because visitors from around the world will come into there. And I wonder if Birmingham are going to do anything about that. What are they going to input into our town to welcome visitors? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Terry. John, I've just dropped you a message and an email. So are you able to bring up the brochure that I emailed over to you, and also the Google Maps link, if I can, please? I've also sent you a copy of the quote that I received from the company. So for residents, this is actually a genuine moment of democracy and voting, where actually the online poll may make a substantial difference to the future of the ward. So the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum and I, so as I say, separately, we had a meeting, and I invited Pat Lyons to explain the proposal from the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum. And as they were doing it, I chuckled, because I'd basically come up with the same suggestion. And this is for what is in effect outdoor gym equipment to be sited on some locations. And our consideration was primarily to, one, fulfill the criteria, but secondly, as I suggested earlier, something which lasts. So I didn't want to splash, in effect, £10,000 out on a party, or a good feel vibe factor for there not to have anything of lasting significance to contribute to the ward. And what we're looking at having is, in effect, some gym equipment. So these are the outdoor machines that you can see. I think there's some on top of the Newhall Valley. And the sites that we are considering are in front of the Wylde Green Community Hall, there's a circular patch of grass down Emscote Lane. And if you move further down, heading towards Heron Court, there is actually another larger piece of grass as well. So these are, as I understand it, public areas. It's under the control of the council. But these are very much preliminary suggestions. I haven't got the written application put together or anything like that, but I wanted to put it up for consideration for yourselves. And if there's an overwhelming majority, then I would take that as a nod, and then I could perhaps take that forward. Councillor Wood. John, are you able to get your screen sharing then, please?
I am failing you miserably, I'm afraid, Councillor. I've
Not at all.
tried several times and I just cannot get it to come into the share.
Well, there we are. I can see that now. Terry, did you want to come in?
To be honest with you, Alex, I'm against this because I think it might attract the wrong sort of people into that area. Emscote Drive consists mainly of elderly or disabled people, and I don't think it's appropriate that we put that sort of equipment in there. There is already a gym on the second floor of the lanes thing, so if anybody wants to do any activities, they can always go there.
Well, I suppose the idea for this equipment is for the elderly to use, and but no, I take the point, and it's been a valid concern that's been raised to me as well by some others. John, if I could trouble you just to skip down on the brochure that you've got in front of you. So to give residents an idea about what we are considering.
Is this actually working, Councillor?
That's fine, yes, that's perfect.
You say my side, it's not showing at all. Okay, that's good.
That's fine. Thank you very much. So a little bit further down, so that gives you an idea about some of the equipment that we're suggesting. And I think it's the next page down. One more. One more. So again, it just gives you an idea about that. There we go. So it'll be a set of, I think it's 5 or 6 gym equipment sites like this. Very similar to the ones on the top of the Newhall Valley. And the idea is that it fits in with the criteria put forward to meet in terms of it being get fit, get active, and also we can quite easily tie it together with the Commonwealth Games. I take the concerns that Councillor Wood raised around potential antisocial behaviour, etc. But I think the idea of trying to bring some equipment like this, which would be a benefit to the elderly, something which is lasting as well, something to try and bring the community together around at the heart of the ward, I think it's a very good one. And I know that from other colleagues across the ward, is that they are also considering similar applications like this as well. John, can I trouble you to jump onto the Google links that I sent to you, please, the Google Map links? So that's not the right one.
Aha.
So there's a Google link that I sent you. For those who don't know the intended location, it's the Wylde Green neighbourhood, sorry, the Wylde Green Community Hall on Emscote Drive.
Is that showing, Councillor?
No, it isn't. It was the link that I sent you on email, the first one. It's no matter if you can't bring it up.
Sorry, I'm struggling.
That's quite okay. So that's the proposed site and that's the proposed equipment. I'm very happy to take comments at this point.
If I may, Councillor.
Please.
I mean, you are correct. A piece of equipment would most definitely hit the criteria, and it would also hit the sustainability element, which is what the city is looking for. Because although we will fund small local parties, etc., 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 we know that there's sustainability with a piece of equipment, so it would have a long-lasting impact that would fit the criteria.
Thank you. Does anybody have any thoughts? Any concerns? Pat, is that yourself? John, would you like to end the screen sharing?
I certainly will try.
Thank you. Pat, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Yes. Pat, Line and I, we have today submitted a bid. We filled in the online form and we submitted a bid for gym equipment in the near the community hall that you outlined, plus some benches identifying the various sports that are going to take part in the park in Sutton Coldfield. So we went ahead and did that. because we understood that first of all it would be looked at, and then we'd be asked for more information, and then there would be a ward vote for approval, if you're with me. We did read all the conditions. Now, we sent it off this morning, and we haven't received any acknowledgement via an email at all. Should we be concerned about that at all?
If I may, Councillor? We hopefully will be back to you within 48 hours.
Okay, so it's not instant, that's fine. Okay.
I am aware of one group in Sutton Coldfield, however, that were adamant that they had gone through the online system and it didn't work, and they did send them out a Word document in the end to make certain they actually registered.
Right. It wasn't an easy process to do, I must add.
I'm sure it will be coming our way, but if I haven't seen it by Monday, I will contact you and let you know.
Okay, because we've pasted up the information we've put on that more or less on the application online, so we could repeat it on the simpler form that you were talking about. Okay.
But to expand on the processes,
the
community group will actually submit this, councillor, which is obviously what has then been done. It then goes to a small panel of city officers who will review it to make certain if it's the criteria of the Commonwealth Games, that it's good value for money, and that it actually fits everything that from a probity perspective that the city would actually expect. Once we've done that, two things can happen. We'll either write back to the original group to say, yes, we like the look of that. We may say, well, it looks a bit weak here. Could you think about considering how you expand that? Or we may just say it's absolutely awful and it doesn't fit the criteria at all. And we have had a couple of those. I'm sure this won't be the case tonight, but it does actually happen. So it is a case of watch this space. But I will certainly keep an eye on it to make certain it comes through, because I haven't had it come through to me yet.
Right, okay. And
may I ask, do you get the ward vote there, John?
Sorry, councillor?
At what point do you take it to the ward?
Right, well, once we've actually got the applications, we'll then come back to the ward. I mean, it is in the hands of the ward to make the decision. I've got to stress that. I won't be able to influence that one way or the other. I can offer sort of general support, but because I'll be part of the panel that actually assesses the applications coming in, I won't be able to make a direct decision. And then it comes back to the ward and it's up to the ward to decide. I mean, we can arrange a very quick ward meeting for you, which will be specific just for the Commonwealth Games, just to put through a bid very, very quickly, or we can wait if we think there's going to be several coming in, and then we can have it open to the general vote and debate. I would stress it is city money. The elected member will have to be part of the key process of that, because of course it's council money, and that's why we've got city councillors. They exist for a reason. It's for moments like this. It's not a lot of money, and I'm going to keep stressing that, and I'm sure it's not going to be anything like the amount of money that we actually want, but we'll try and make the best of it. And it is a general open offer. If I can help groups that have got bank accounts and they've got a constitution, I will help them drawing finance to either match it or look at something completely different if necessary.
That's very clear. Thank you very much, John. Tony, did you want to come in? Thank you.
Hello, you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm new to this, although I have been a resident here for some time. I'm Tony Whitehead. If I can just introduce myself to the group. I'm running a campaign called Our Town, which is essentially a civic improvement campaign. And we're mainly involved with the town centre and the Langley Pedimore developments, the Sustainable Urban Extension. I'm also a member of an environmental group, which is local. We meet in Wylde Green, which is called Eco Sutton, which is where I started about 3 or 4 years ago when I got involved in these sort of civic regeneration projects. Now, we've done a lot of work in our town in coming up with sort of creative ideas, really, to improve the streetscape, public spaces. I must admit, I think the gym equipment idea is a great idea. It's really, really good. Although I can understand the issues about locality and you know, possible conflicts and concerns about it, but I think it's a really good idea. The purpose of contributing at this point is that we have a lot of stuff already on the drawing board in terms of public art projects, sculptures, gateway sentinels, all sorts of stuff that we've come at, and we've put to town council and stakeholders in terms of sort of some quick fixes, really, for the town centre. Now, some of these ideas might be applicable for this really interesting Commonwealth Games grant. So I'm really just introducing the initiative and saying that we are able, I can go back to members of both groups, to come up with some good ideas through the ward, through the councillor, and maybe come up with something fresh and new.
That's very helpful, Tony. Thank you very much.
Can I just stress at that point, though, councillor, make certain, straight right the way through on that presentation, make certain it connects to the Commonwealth Games. I've seen some fantastic worthy courses that have put bids in, have no connection to the Commonwealth Games, and we've had to dismiss them immediately. It is Commonwealth Games funding, therefore there has to be some sort of alignment to the Commonwealth Games. It's just
John,
sort of
I understand that loud and clear. I've made a note of that, and I understand it. I've done lots of bids in the past, so I understand. Read the question 3 times. So
well done,
I
Tony.
understand that, but I think it's possible. We may come up with something.
Absolutely.
I don't know, but I think there's some
some of the other criteria as well is not to make up for lost funding, and from initial soundings it sounds that perhaps the town council funding may be another way of trying to get the projects that you're looking for to into fruition. But perhaps you and I can have a conversation separately after this meeting to see how we can take that forward. And again, if you want any support in putting an application forward, I'm sure John and myself would be very happy to help you with that. I do want to stress everybody is free and happy to put applications forward if they wish. Jan, I know that you've posted something on the chat. Did you want to come in publicly to add your comments?
Yeah, thank you. I live up the road from where the proposed locations are, and my concern would be that they're not in the mainstream road. They're not particularly lit well, and I think that they're slightly inappropriate. I think it would attract maybe people who are out late at night, maybe had a few drinks, a lot of noise, a lot of either, and potentially a lot of vandalism as well. So given the residents that are situated around there, I just think it's an inappropriate place to put them.
May I ask if you got an alternative that you would consider?
No, not particularly. I just, and it's not because it's just down the road from here, because actually I think it's a fantastic idea. I just think the locations that you're thinking of aren't appropriate really for what potentially could become a hazard long term.
I think there's a part of me that doesn't want to give in to the antisocial behaviour elements within the ward. And if we know that it's going to get vandalised, if that's a reason to not do it, it's almost, for me, it's a reason to do it, so that we can try and override that and turn the ward into a better way. I always feel that if we surrender the ground to those sorts of elements, then we're almost giving in. And there's also ways of trying to improve street lighting, etc. And if you turn it into a positive location, there's of course a school around the corner. I see it as a way of trying to raise the ward. But I absolutely take on board your comments, and as I say, it hasn't been an isolated comment and a concern that's been put to me. Councillor Lee, did you want to come in, sir?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Good evening, all. Councillor Lee Fadalen. I think this is a fantastic idea, and more so, we're always preparing things for children. And this time we get the elderly to enjoy. And let's hope there are more spaces that it can do it. If we are going to start thinking about vandalism, then we won't have bus sheds. We won't have nothing. So I think it's a fantastic idea. It's always something. There's so many things that it's set out for this for the parish that we need to get all ideas coming here. But we are always leaving out the elderly. Admittedly, it may be so, but it is our responsibility to prevent those who prepare to come and vandalize, to have them removed. We have done such a great research on what was going on in Wylde Green so far, as councillors in the city, with the police come up with a record to say there's a decrease in a lot of things. We will do the same. We have to look into these things, and the next, don't go in for May, you go in for a later date where it can be looked at, as there is a lot of concern, but the councillors must make sure all these things are going to be in their pyramid to look at these issues. We know there will be concern, but we cannot throw it out. And if we're going to run from vandalism, we are going to be 2001, just the same thing. So we have to do something, and we must prepare ourselves to go out there and keep it safe. It is for the elderly, and if it's possible, the biggest word you've used here tonight, the greatest word to me, it's not been said for a very long time, it's for the elderly. Please do it if we can. Thank you.
You're very kindly. Thanks so much. Before I bring you in, John, so the third alternative that I do have a poll which I want to try and get people's feedback on. So the third alternative is the small grass pitch area on the corner of Wylde Green Road and Mayney Hill Road. So as you go down Wylde Green Road heading towards the Wormley Village, before you turn left on Mayney Hill, there's a long stretch of grass just between there and the bridge and the Bishop Walsh School. So that's an alternative location. But again, I think, as Councillor Wood suggested, because of the close proximity to a secondary school, that was seen as perhaps a less desirable location. Whereas the community hall, of course, being a community hall, being a central location, it being near slightly elderly population or so, that's probably seen as a preferred option. John?
I'd like to share something with you, and I'm not suggesting that we go down this line, but it's to come back to what that gentleman said earlier. In Perry Common, many years ago, we had a couple of really bad hotspots of antisocial behaviour. We had groups of 10, 12, even 20 youths hanging around street corners and being a proverbial pain in the derriere, and it was not particularly pleasant. And what we ended up with was a group of elderly old ladies who adopted the phrase, "Let's go hug a hoodie." And they walked the streets hugging all of these young villains, and the villains couldn't cope with it and they ran away. They literally ran away because they had no street cred whatsoever if they'd got little old ladies in their 80s rushing up and giving them a kiss on the cheek.
Oh, God.
Can be done. Can be done.
You remind me of antisocial behaviour that I think was happening down in London, and they started playing classical music on the certain areas, and they just scarpered because, as you say, it destroys their street cred, doesn't it? Councillor Wood?
I think the land you've just described, the bottom of Wylde Green Road, I think it's private land, Alex. I don't think it's Birmingham's land.
So it is classed as a park, apparently. I have made some preliminary inquiries, but I think in terms of some feedback that I've got from residents, again, it's a less preferred option. I'd prefer to keep it in, as you suggested earlier, a central location near the community centre. So I don't want to drag this item on because we do have the rest of the ward item to consider, if I may, Pat. So I'm going to share the poll. I don't know, John, whether we could take this as a binding indication or not, but I will do it anyway. So there is a poll which is popping up now. In terms of the Commonwealth Games proposal, gym equipment. So the options are for an agreement for some sort of outdoor equipment. So it's outside the community hall or outside the Heron Court or outside Mayney Hill Road. And then if you vote against, then you're just against any sort of outdoor equipment. If I can ask everybody just to submit an initial poll on that, if I can, please.
Where is this poll, Alex? I can't see it.
No, mate.
Damn.
I can't see it. I've not seen it at all. Where is it?
Annoying. So
Sorry.
it's on the chat.
So I can...
It should be on the chat if you can't see that, but it should pop up on
the chat.
Hopefully. If not, then I can.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Oh, it. Hang on. Yes, I can see it.
Fantastic.
Sorry. I'll yes.
So for residents, if you can see, there should either be a screen that pops up on your a box that pops up on your screen, or it'll be in the chat. There's another option. So it's either for one of the options for the outdoor gym equipment, or a vote against. And I think it's a vote against which I'm most interested in. While everybody's doing that,
I can't see. Sorry, where is it? Sorry,
so
Alex.
it should be on the chat there, Terry.
Other way.
On the chat box.
Terry, if you scroll across your grey toolbar, you know where you mute, there is a slightly round, what looks like a bubble. It says show conversation.
Yes.
If you click on that, to your right hand side of the screen, it'll come up with a little box that says meeting chat.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
and then if you scroll to the top, it'll give you the voting there.
Fantastic.
Okay,
thank you very much.
much.
So that's the first proposal. The second proposal, which I just want to quickly rattle through. John, I don't know if you're able to bring the photo that I sent over to you for the lanes. That's the one with the black and white lines. But in terms of a very quick second proposal, this is for much smaller grants of around £1,000. I neglected to say, I think Pat Brown and Pat Lyons, the initial proposal for the gym equipment. So that's the location that we're one of the locations that we're looking at. But the second proposal is for around £1,000, and I'm considering, or have been trying to get a competition going between the primary schools in the ward. So there's 4 primary schools in the Wylde Green area, and I wanted to get a competition going between the 4 of them to paint a mural outside Fabrica in the tunnel where the Lane shopping centre is. And this is something which I've got the approval from the landlord to do it. I want to get the Sutton Coldfield YMCA to undertake the work and get a local artist to undertake the work. And again, the YMCA is also conveniently within the Wylde Green ward, and to do a competition. So I would put a proposal out to the schools for them to come up with a design, and then the school internally would vote on the best design option. And then hopefully there'll be space for 4 murals alongside the wall. If everybody knows what I'm talking about, it's along the Costa. If you turn left and you go down the tunnel, and it's to brighten the area, turn into a bit of a centre of attraction. And I think something like that to hopefully supplement and complement the outdoor gym equipment will try and turn it into a positive area. And I'm mindful of the graffiti and the antisocial behaviour, the begging, etc., that's started to creep into the ward, perhaps because of its close proximity to Worthington and various other antisocial elements. But it's something which I feel quite strongly about, and I want to try and bring other communities in to try and reclaim these sorts of areas, hence why I'm doing this sort of thing. So the second poll which I'm going to put on, and this is for a relatively small amount, and I can't, it's, you know, speaking candidly, I can't really see that much issue with this being that contentious. And it is also in terms of small amounts for £1,000, which I think would more than cover what would be required. Just to let everybody know, the gym equipment is for a region of around £10,000. So that will be very much at the upper limit of what would be required to make that happen. But again, these are preliminary discussions. We haven't properly considered in terms of repairing and the land, etc., and other preliminary things which may have to go. I'm also hopeful, John, is that if other groups do also consider taking this on, is that we could do almost a collective bid. If 6 or 7 wards want to do something similar, we can all put one application, haggle them down and try and get it installed in one go, which hopefully will bring the cost down as opposed to separate applications. But I'm sure you can take that forward as well. Okay.
Well, I was just thinking as well, Councillor, if you want to get the school to contact me, I'll see whether or not there's any potential pots that they could apply to actually do some match funding with this.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you indeed. Okay, so those are the 2 polls that's collated, and I'm grateful for everybody's feedback. In terms of the results, so we have got what have we got? So we've got 8 for the mural, 1 against the mural. So I'd perhaps consider that broadly carried. In terms of the outdoor equipment, we've got 6 for, 2 against, so slightly more contentious. So perhaps we can hold back on that. If the resident who's got concerns with the mural wants to email me separately, I'd be happy to hear their concerns. Okay. Is there anything else anybody wants to raise on the Commonwealth Games funding before I move on? Pat.
That's a dreadful noise. Can I just say that our bid isn't solely about gym equipment, it's other things as well. For example, more benches with engraving depicting the various sports that are going to take part in the park. So it's to enable people to relax and enjoy the open space as well. So it's not just for gym equipment. That, you know, sort of, which might.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else anybody else wants to raise before we move on? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much all for participating with that. I appreciate it's a bit difficult with the technical issues, and I didn't realise people weren't seeing the poll, so apologies about that. The final item is just on a very quick ward update, and I'm very happy to take comments and questions and feedback from residents, which is for me the most important part, because with lockdown we haven't been out about as much, we haven't had our in-person ward meetings, there's been so much less interaction with people. So I feel myself a little bit out of the loop in terms of what is going on and how residents are feeling. There's 5 main points as to want to pick up. John, I don't know if you could bring up that first map that you did, the Wylde Green ward map with the grey and the white shading, if you can for me, please. It's a very quick update. So Councillor O'Shea, who's the cabinet member for streets and cleaning and waste, he's informed me that there's around 500 properties in Sutton who are having their green waste collection moved. So it normally happens on a Tuesday. It will be moved to a Wednesday, and it will take effect from next week. There is a map which highlights which roads are affected, and I'm asking John to bring that up if he can. So that's just a very quick thing just for people to know. My suggestion would be, if you do have green waste, just to put it out on the Tuesday and the Wednesday, and then you will know very quickly which, if you fall into that bracket or not. Broadly speaking, it follows the Green Lanes side, so towards the west of the ward. 2 other updates around roads. So VZ Road will be undergoing a full resurfacing on the 28th of May. This has been the result of quite a lot of work and campaigning and pushing in emails and following up and chasing. But I'm very happy to say that we finally managed to get a significant road that is in significant issue and need of repair resurfaced. So that'll be commencing on 28th of May. We haven't got a firm end date on that. But in terms of the other roads, which I know many residents have got expressed concerns around, especially Maney Hill, the top end, Hollyfast Road, and some others as well, it really does go to show how hard it is for me to get roads resurfaced and even potholes attended to. Residents may remember Broadfields Road. It took 4 years, 3 all whole residents named petitions to get that road resurfaced, and I managed to get that labelled as the worst road in Birmingham at one point in order to try and put the pressure on council. But is a sign of perhaps how slowly things move, but eventually, and I hope with everybody's forbearance and patience, that we can get things done. Pat, I'm just going to mute you if I can. I think there's some feedback coming back, right? Moving on around speeding. So speeding's been mentioned along Penn's Lane, especially numerous times to me by various residents. I'm considering trying to put forward a petition for a average speed trap from the Warmley Village end all the way down to the Birmingham Road end. Now, I hesitate to put this forward. The chances of this getting done are quite remote. With council approving it, funding, etc., is very, very low. But a number of residents have asked me to put this forward for the ward's consideration. So I just wanted to put it out there to residents to see if you have any firm objection against my trying to pursue this. And I've been very frank to the residents, the chances of this getting done are very, very slim. But it's something which some people have expressed a lot of concern around, because they do speed down the whole length of it. It does go, if you know the road, it goes down and it goes up. It's reasonably wide. It's very residential. There's schools on. So I understand the argument. Whether we can put a strong enough case to council for them to consider putting an average speed along the road would be, in my opinion, very remote. But I do like to try and fight these no hope, no win cases on the off chance that we can actually get something significant done. So I'll just leave that there for residents to consider. If you want to email me your thoughts, very happy to take those forward. And again, thank you in advance. There's 2 planning issues. So many residents will know that the Wylde Green pub has resubmitted their application to try and get their development put through. Sorry, the developers, Adlingtons, are trying to get the Wylde Green pub redeveloped. My expectation is that that application would fail again. They are also trying to appeal it to the Secretary of State level, which would somewhat bypass the council level. But again, any of the feedback I'm trying to feed residents in, there's an email chain which I regularly use just to notify some residents about updates on that as and when I hear it. If you want any updates on that Wylde Green pub specifically, please again do email me and I will include you in that list. That's all I want to say in the planning situation. I know there are some other ones dotted around the ward, but I don't particularly want to take up the rest of everybody's evening. On Highbridge Road, so we are trying to get some safety improvements done onto the Highbridge Road as you're heading towards the Sutton Girls' School. Many residents may know it's actually on the brow of the hill on the road. there were actually 2 exits from the railway station leading straight onto the road. And there's been a number of near accidents with students from Sutton Girls who regularly use that going upwards and downwards. And you may know, in terms of the height of the bridge and the summit, it is quite a blind summit. So we are looking at trying to put some railing down, to try and put some drop curbing in to try and make that a little bit safer. And that's something which I'm using delegated ward funds to try and push through. We're also getting Station Road double yellow lined as well. Finally, again, this is something which has been taking a lot of time and effort to try and get put through. So there is a small stretch, we're just expanding it. Again, I hope residents will appreciate it's quite hard to try and expand that too much. But it's something, again, that we've been working on for quite some years. So if anybody else has any issues or concerns that they want to raise with me, it is an indication. It does take some time. I hope that you will bear with me, but it does join the list. And if enough residents express the same wish and desire, it does push it up the list. And as and when opportunities do arise, we do our best to try and get this put through. And then the final one is just around a general litter. So many residents will know the Sutton Coalfield litter picking group has been established and is very, very effective. It started off as a Warmley one. It's expanded very successfully across the whole of Sutton, with residents adopting roads. I will be doing another litter pick with the Wylde Green Rotary in a couple of weeks' time. We're also getting the network rail to attend to the waste that's been dropped from Bishop Walsh students over the bridge on Wylde Green Road down onto the rail track. So there's lots of things that we are doing, but unfortunately, the number of chicken shops that's appeared on Birmingham Road is causing a significant nuisance, with customers eating and then spreading it pretty much the length of Birmingham Road, with very kind and generous residents then having to go and pick up after them. So those are the main issues that I wanted to update residents on. I'm very happy to take any questions, but more importantly, if there's anybody who has any other issues which I've missed, any feedback, any concerns that they want to raise, please do put your hand up. I'm very happy to shut up and listen for a little bit. I've got a hand up from Mag Healy.
Hello, Alex. It's just a general question. The Norman Lord Association, what's happening to the buildings and the land that they've now had to vacate?
Yes, so for those who don't know, very sadly and incredibly frustratingly, the Norman Lord Association, a charity that was actually set up by, in effect, my predecessor many years ago, some 60 years ago, Councillor Norman Lord, which gave respite care for children with disabilities sited along the Birmingham Road. Unfortunately, they are, for various reasons, they decided that they didn't have a financial future, decided to close. A number of residents and I fought this bitterly to try and get it reinstated and try and find funding to keep it open, enlisted the help of the cabinet member. Unfortunately, they carried on to make the decision to close, tried to get Charities Commission involved, and again, they were unable to assist. So unfortunately, the charity is closed. My understanding, and I've just actually had a call from a friend who's been helping me on this, is that there is some money that's been left over after the organisation has paid off all its debts, and we're trying to make sure that goes to a charitable cause. But in terms of the building itself, because it's a private entity, I will not be informed in terms of its future use, only in terms of there's a change of use application, or as and when anybody wants to approach me to ask me for my support in any future application or change of use or opening or any information or help. So I'm very limited in terms of what is being put forward for future use. My unofficial understanding from people who I've been speaking to is that there is a similar use that is being proposed for that site, but I can't speak any further on that.
Is it by the same trustees, do you know?
No.
No. So who actually owns the building? Is it because my husband was president of the association and very heavily involved? They reckon they notified all lifetime members when they changed their rules. We didn't receive any notification.
No, they didn't. No. This is one of the things that we were trying to hold them to account on, because as an association, they were obliged to contact members. And that was one of the sticking points that we're trying to hold them to get them to rescind their decision to close, call a proper AGM for us to then come in and basically stop them from taking that decision. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in our legal push for that. The building is actually owned by the Sutton Coldfield Municipal Charities, so they weren't paying rent to them. And again, that's the person who I've been speaking to unofficially to find out what's going to happen with it. I understand it to be a similar use, but I haven't heard anything further from that.
The only reason that it's come to mind, I actually saw an advert for staff required to help with disabled people in the Wylde Green area, and it was highlighting Emscote Drive, and I didn't know whether it was coming up under a new heading or whether that related to the old people complex.
Well, Mrs. Healy, perhaps if we take a conversation afterwards, if you want to drop me a line,
Yes,
happy to pick that up separately.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else anybody else wants to raise? Peter, and then Pauline.
Regarding Highbridge Road, my son has his business there at Aquascape Fishing Port, and I go and help him most days there. The whole road is being treated like a racetrack. The speed of vehicles going either way down there, they're well over 30 miles an hour, and several door mirrors have been ripped off. Is there any way the speeding can be monitored first of all, and then something done to slow it down?
So thank you for that, Peter. I think your son's shop will be on the VZ side of the ward then. So the railway track is actually the boundary of the ward. Everything to the east of the railway track falls under Wylde Green. Everything to the left falls under VZs. That will be Councillor Pocock and Councillor Kath Scott. But in terms of the length of the ward, I think a lot of the speeding happens from Boldmere heading into Warmley. The Wylde Green side is a little bit narrower. And absolutely, I think there's some concerns with speeding across the ward, hence my early comments around Penn's Lane, with residents being so infuriated by this, they actually want to get an average speed trap put in along the length of it. In order to try and take this forward, so many residents will know I've spoken at length about this in the past, trying to get police officers to stay on site to do speed checks, speed awareness instances. These have all been done, but as many people will know, once the officers move, the speeding invariably returns. We cannot put 30 signs down because this is not allowed, or the highway code states that all roads are 30 unless otherwise indicated. So I have no power to request or try and get 30 signs put down. We have a number of speed indication signs, which you may have seen deployed down Penn's Lane, down Wylde Green Road and other sites. But the difficulty, of course, is if you oversaturate the ward with speed awareness signs, it loses its effectiveness. And of course, it's only a warning indication sign. There's no real stick that goes with that being triggered. But these are all things that we are trying to do. We do regularly organise speed awareness residents, where we get residents or school children to stand and basically highlight to drivers that they are speeding and try and shame people into being more responsible for their own actions. But ultimately, as everybody will know, it all comes down to personal responsibility, and I can't really legislate or enforce against that.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all. Pauline?
Hi. As you know, Alex, I live on Broadfields Road, and I've been concerned about the rubbish and the fly tipping lately. And this is becoming a regular thing on our road. And obviously, because a lot of the people who are putting the rubbish out are living above the shops in flats and accommodation. So I just wanted to know if there was any update on that and what's going on.
Yes, thank you very much for Pauline, and I didn't recognise the name until you chimed in. Yes, so for residents who don't know, it's just down by where the Verdo Lounge is, Broadfields Road, on that corner. Frustratingly, the past couple of weeks, there's been 20-30 bags that's appeared regularly every week, and the fridge was also dumped there as well. I have reported it to fly tipping, I have reported it to council. They came, cleared it away, and then annoyingly it appeared the next week. And this is one of the frustrations with, especially with litter picking. We clear up the mess after other people and then they do it again. We have tried to get enforcement to try and really dig through the rubbish to find out who's responsible. I'll double check to see how the inquiries are going. But my understanding at the moment is it hasn't returned. Pauline, is that right?
Not this week, it hasn't, no, fingers crossed.
Yes. Yeah. So there was a fridge that was removed. I think the residents have been emailed or written letters to just to remind them. But there's an issue around the residents to live above the Verdo Lounge and that strip of shops because they don't have wheelie bins, because they don't have a place to store it. The other issue is around Hollyfast Road and the corner of Wylde Road, where the old Domino's pizza shop used to be. So those 3 containers, it's been literally 4 months of work to try and get those bins emptied properly and not stored on the road. And frustratingly, they are still there. The responsibility on the business is to store them behind their own shop and kept off the public road, but unfortunately not, because they're there. It attracts fly tipping and black bags, which then pile up. Then there's a miscollection, and then it ends up attracting rats and smelling, and with wastewater going down the pedestrian side. So I'm very aware of the 2, Pauline, on both sides of the Birmingham Road. It takes a huge amount of time to get the smallest thing done, especially when it's around enforcement, and frustratingly, it's quite easily happening again.
Yeah, okay. There's just another thing, Alex, before you go. I've made several complaints to the council regarding the fan extractors and the smells coming from the from Birmingham Road off some of the businesses.
Yes, so I've got some good news around that. We have got some enforcement action that is coming through. So I've got an email a couple of days ago on that, and it has been escalated several times, and they have been notified, and there are enforcement officers who are taking action at the moment on that. So there hopefully will be some good news coming through following on that, because it is a clear condition of their license being agreed, is that they need to keep the noise down, etc., during certain times, because it is a residential area.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Not at all. Is there anything else anybody else wants to raise? Fantastic. Well, I think that reaches the end of our agenda. So you'd be glad to know, managed to keep it to a very soft number of hours. So I really want to thank you all very much for taking the time to join us on. It is a difficult format, but I'm very grateful for everybody's time, the feedback using the poll, giving me some contribution, and it's always nice to be able to update you on what's going on with the ward. If there are any concerns, please do feel free to email me. It's the best way of contacting me. And I do tend to respond quite quickly, and I'm very happy to keep people in touch with certain issues if they wish. I also want, for those who joined late to the meeting, I do want to again congratulate Councillor Terry Wood, who's our newly anointed mayor for the royal town of Sutton Coldfield for this next municipal year. So if you see him wearing a gold chain walking around, getting out of a fancy limo, do remember to sidle up and get a photo with him. And I do want to wish him very well for the year coming. Apart from that, I'm very happy to stay on for a couple of minutes if anybody wants to side chat afterwards. I do want to again thank Leslie and John, a number of officers, for their help in making sure this meeting runs so smoothly. It is very much appreciated. We'll try and get another ward meeting put together perhaps in maybe as near as a couple of months' time, because we will need to get the other application approved for the Commonwealth Games funding. And everybody be sent due notice of that. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Alex. Well done.
Thank you, Terry.